Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Amber, the Outreach Coordinator here at Climate Action Now, and one of many people who work to bring this action party to you today. We're going to give folks just a few minutes to continue joining. While we're doing that, we've got a fun icebreaker question for everyone to answer in the chat. Our icebreaker this evening is, where are you joining from, and what body of water are you most passionate about protecting? You should see it in the chat now, and please start answering. If you're feeling up for it, please also turn on your camera so we can see some friendly faces tonight. We will be recording this action party, and it will be available publicly online. We'll send out the recording tomorrow. However, if you'd prefer not to appear, feel free to keep your camera off. If this is your first ever climate action party, first of all, welcome. Let me give you a quick overview. An action party like this is an opportunity to learn more about important environmental issues from people who are experts in their fields. In the course of the same hour, we will use the Climate Action Now Action Carousel. The CAN Action Carousel makes it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to political decision makers and business leaders. To show you why it's so easy to take action with the CAN Action Carousel, I'll share my screen for just a moment. Bear with me as I do that. All right, you guys should all be able to see my screen now. This is an example action like the ones that you'll all have access to tonight. It only takes 3 clicks to take an action. First, you're going to click Do It Now. Then you choose how you want to contact your decision maker. So by putting in your address to the carousel, you're going to be automatically connected to your federal, state, and sometimes local officials. So my state representative is Jimmy Petronis. All I have to do is click Send Message. I'm going to get an amazing customized action that I can send, a message to send to him. And all I have to do is click Send Message. Easy as that, I've taken action. As you take actions, you earn points. When you earn enough points, Climate Action Now plants a real tree on your behalf. So far, Climate Action Now has planted over 435,000 trees together, and we've taken over 4 million actions. All right, now let's go over to Kaylee Beam, Director of Content at Climate Action Now, to get you started with taking action tonight. Over to you, Kaylee.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Kaylee Beam, Climate Action Now's Director of Content. Thanks so much for answering our little icebreaker in the chat, and thank you, Bill, for the plug for the Climate Action Now carousel. It is awesome. We encourage any group who's interested to sign up with us to get your own carousel on your website. But yeah, let's look at your answers to our icebreaker. I love the range we have here. Of course, we have people joining us from all over, which is always lovely. Someone says they're from the OC, passionate about protecting all of it, all water, which I think is amazing. But then we also have people all the way down to, the Finger Lakes in Ithaca, all the Great Lakes. So a real range of bodies of water that everyone is passionate about. So thanks so much for playing along with our icebreaker, and keep those answers coming. We love to see your responses and also where you're joining from. So without further ado, before we kick off the main event, I'm going to get us all ready to take action. So let me just share my screen, which you should be seeing shortly. All right, so as many of you already know, this is our goal tracker. On the left side, we have the blue marble, which will fill in and iterate as we take action here tonight. And on the right side, we have a QR code and link, which will take you to an action carousel on the Climate Action Now website. An action carousel like the one you'll be using tonight is available for any organization that wants to scale up their impact, and you can get one embedded on your group's website in a matter of minutes. And of course, if you don't have a website, do not worry, we can host one for you on the Climate Action Now website. So it's super easy to sign up and get your own carousel. All right, so for those of you who want to access the carousel on your computers, feel free to type in the short link or click on it in the chat. Let me drop it in there right now, and that will take you straight to tonight's campaign on the Climate Action Now website. But if you prefer to use your phone or tablet, just point your camera at the QR code box, wait for the little pop-up to appear, and just tap on it to get to the carousel. Of course, if you've never used the carousel before, like Amber was saying, you'll have to put in some basic information to take action, like your name, address, email, and personalized message. And for those of you who already have app accounts but are using the carousel for the first time, don't worry, you won't have to start from scratch. The carousel will recognize your email and prompt you to enter a verification code. And once you put that in, it will transfer all your progress from the app to the carousel. And of course, for all you dedicated app users who we so deeply appreciate, you can still access tonight's campaign there under Save Our Water in the Campaigns tab. It's in the Protect Nature section. So I'm going to give everyone a moment to get in there, and if it's not working for you, that's totally okay. The campaign will still be open for the next couple of weeks, and we'll share detailed instructions in our event follow-up email to help you access it. All right, so that's all from me. Today we have a bit of a special treat for you, which is a screening from the PBS documentary Thirst for Power, which explores the critical connections between energy, water, and human survival. After the we'll transition to tonight's live discussion, so please enjoy. Over to you, Amber.
There's a proverb in the American West, which is whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over. Because who gets access to the water has access to wealth and power. You look all up and down the energy supply chain, water is at every critical step. That means if the water is not available the way you want it to be, the energy system is vulnerable.
That could mean having to shut down a lot of power plants because there simply is not the water to run them. There is no backup plan. You're done.
Funding for this program was made possible by Itron and by the State Energy Conservation Office.
Water is life. Water has been key to life and civilization for thousands of years. We need water within our bodies so our bodies can thrive. We need water to grow food. And then we need water for washing and for hygiene to keep ourselves healthy. In the modern world, we use water to make energy. And then we use energy to get access to water. They're interconnected. The energy for water is very visible, but the water we use for energy is usually out of sight, out of mind. Water and energy are the two fundamental components of a modern civilization. We need water for life, and we need energy for quality of life. We would not know a modern civilization without them. The bad news is, if we have a shortage of one, then we might have a shortage of the other, and this becomes very difficult for society. In some parts of the world, that's a crisis we're already confronting today. The thing I worry about the most with energy and water is that we take them for granted, that we need them so much for our quality of life. And I'm afraid because we're not paying attention, we'll make bad decisions and be stuck with those decisions for centuries. I really want us to get it right. As a kid, I was interested in space and space exploration. I thought it'd be really cool to go to Mars. Most of my friends wanted to be astronauts. I always thought I might be the guy that would run the program. As someone who was petrified of heights, I didn't think my life as an astronaut would ever really make sense. I'm Michael Weber, and I study energy and water. I grew up in Austin, Texas, and when I was 12, the family did a trip to the south of France, where I got to visit the Pont du Gard, this massive Roman aqueduct. I was 12 at the time. My brother, who was 15, was unafraid of heights and sort of a daredevil, walked across the top of it. And you could fall off of it. It's very dangerous. He said, you should walk across the top of it. I got fear of heights, and I'm kind of clumsy and uncoordinated. I did it. But this was a very dizzying experience. You're hundreds of feet high. There are places where the roof of the aqueduct was missing. You had to walk along the very edge. The whole visit was a gripping memory in a variety of ways. I was blown away that with ancient means, thousands of years ago, such an incredible structure was built, and that it was built for the sole purpose of moving water.
Bienvenue au pont du Gard.
The Romans figured out thousands of years ago that water and economic power and military power were all the same. Romans built aqueducts as a way to control the empire, and the water was always moving towards centers of innovation or centers of power. Water must be important, and that idea hung with me over the years. I've had a deep fascination in energy and water from those early days traveling with my family in Europe. Now, when I'm not traveling, I'm teaching, I'm writing, I'm doing research. I'm a professor at the University of Texas. Eventually, I decided to write a book called Thirst for Power. I came to understand that energy and water are the two most important parts of society. I thought it was time for me to share some of those findings with the rest of the world. Something about the pair of sewers is how extensive they are, but they're also big enough to walk through. So you can walk through the sewers and see the waste flowing by. You can smell it, you can feel it, right? It's part of the experience. And it's an important part of the city's capabilities. You cannot have a city without a way to manage the wastewater. I thought it was great.
This is Eugene Belgrand. He designed the sewer system. He calculates that sewer tunnels should have a drop of 3 centimeters in the meter. And that is a slope that's steep enough to create a flushing movement in the waters, but it's not so steep that your sewer workers would slip and break their necks. Here we can see sewer workers. Notice we've got one sewer worker above ground and his colleagues will be working below ground. You always have somebody above ground. And what would be the reason for that? Why do you have somebody above ground?
Make sure they don't.
Imagine if you've got this thunderstorm, then you might have an inundation, in which case your colleagues might drown. So that means you've got to keep somebody above ground to keep an eye on the weather. Can I tempt you into the job of a sewer worker? No, sorry about
The pair of sewers teach us that managing waste is important, that we generate waste from our trash, from our bodies, from civilization as a whole. And you have to manage the waste. You have to dispose of it or deal with it in some way. And we use energy along the way to manage those wastes so that we don't choke on our own pollution. Because the power sector uses so much water, when we're plugging in an electrical device, we're actually consuming water whether we know it or not. That water is being used out of sight, out of mind, maybe at a power plant hundreds of miles away, but we're plugging into water. We think we're plugging into electricity, we are, but we're plugging into water too. It turns out that a typical American uses something like 150 gallons of water per person per day in their home for watering the lawn, showering, cooking, the tap, the shower head, that kind of thing. But we're using hundreds of gallons of water per person per day to cool the power plants to make the electricity for that same home. We're using more water through our electrical outlets and our lights than we are through our water system, whether we realize it or not.
We use a tremendous amount of energy to clean, treat, deliver the water that we need. But it turns out that we also use a tremendous amount of water just to cool the major thermoelectric power plants of America, the nuclear plants, the coal, oil, and natural gas plants. And so those connections between water and energy are what we talk about when we talk about the water energy nexus.
So we use water to get the energy resource out of the ground. Think of oil, there are techniques like water flooding, where you inject water into the oil well to flush the oil out. There are techniques like hydraulic fracturing, where you use water to fracture the shale to get oil and gas out of the ground. You use water at coal mines to rinse the coal and to do dust control. Water is used at uranium mines to mine the uranium. You'll use water to leach out the different minerals and materials. And then water is sometimes used in industrial processes to, say, enrich or upgrade the uranium or the coal or to treat the natural gas. So water is also used to make the fuels at the power plant. Then it's used to make the steam at the power plant. Then water is used to cool the power plant. Sometimes water is used to move the natural gas or coal or uranium by barges or ships. So water is used all up and down the supply chain of the power sector. In fact, the power sector uses more water for cooling than the agricultural sector uses for growing food, for example. So it's a big number.
Funding for this program was made possible by Itron and by the State Energy Conservation Office.
All right, I hope you all enjoyed that special screening. Be sure to check out the full Thirst for Power documentary. We put the link in the chat for you all. We're now going to move on into our panel discussion. Tonight's conversation will be moderated for us by Alpha Lowe, the author of the Climate Water Project Substack newsletter. Alpha is an expert on the interconnectedness of ecology, climate, and the water cycle. His work focuses on restoring the water cycle as a way to replenish groundwater, reduce flooding, slow climate change, and build long-term resilience. As you hear from our speakers, please feel free to drop your questions into the chat. And just a reminder, you're welcome to continue taking action in the carousel while we hear from our panelists. Alpha, over to you.
All right, thank you. Great to be on here. And yeah, I'd like to introduce our two panelists. So we have Michael Weber. He's the guy you saw in that clip from the movie Thirst for Power. He's a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Texas at Austin, where his work sits at the intersection of energy policy and commercialization. So he's worked. He wrote the book Thirst for Power, and then he's worked with the filmmaker Matt Hans on this documentary. He's also previously served as Chief Technology Officer and Energy Impact Partners, a $5 billion climate tech venture fund. And our other guest we have today is Dr. John Matthews. He's the Executive Director and co-founder of the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. He's a resilient scientist and practitioner for over 2 decades. His work focuses on integrating water and climate policy to drive more durable and effective climate action. Under his leadership, AGWA, the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, became the first organization to formally bridge water and climate at the global policy level. He's also a courtesy professor at Oregon State University. So welcome. Let me start out by asking, so if the public really understood how much our power depends on water and how much our water depends on power, how might that impact how we do our policies? John, do you want to start off?
Sure. I think it's a huge question. I haven't watched the whole of the documentary, but I'm eager to see it. I think this energy water connection is one that is not widely understood even by a lot of technical professionals, and it's one that actually is increasingly important. A lot of my work as an individual and our organization AGWA's work is outside the U.S. And a big part of our work in many countries is actually to help other people understand that even though they may not think they are often critical water managers, and they're making water management decisions all the time. And also that climate change is altering the water cycle under quite a rapid pace at the moment. So as an example, we've been working pretty closely with around 11 ministries in Brazil over the past 2 or 3 years, helping them see that actually what connects topics like health, agriculture, energy, disaster preparedness, mining is actually a water as the kind of connective tissue between them, but they don't make that connection in many cases. So, for instance, we went to the energy ministry. Unlike the U.S., most of Brazil's energy comes from very large hydropower dams. But interestingly, there's as much water embedded in roughly a kilowatt hour of hydropower as there is in kilowatt hour of a coal-fired power plant or a natural gas facility here in the U.S. And some of the special risks that they face in Brazil are that precipitation patterns are changing. Many of you are probably aware that the Amazon is going through some quite significant changes in terms of the amount of rain that it receives, when it gets rain, and the frequency of extreme drought in that basin. And that has a lot of impact on how much hydropower they can really generate. In a lot of ways, they feel very virtuous, right? They're using low carbon power with hydropower, but it's really difficult to think about how to reoperate, how to run these facilities. And it actually leads into other kinds of problems and connections too. For instance, most of the same basins where there are big hydropower plants, there's also a lot of agriculture. And exactly when those plants want to be able to hold the water back in order to really be able to maximize power production during the dry season, that's when the farmers really need the water. And so a lot of our work has been how do you negotiate the trade-offs that are between energy production and the kind of health of the larger economy, all of the quality of life issues that Michael was mentioning in that snippet. But also making sure that a huge part of the economy, agriculture actually, is still getting the water that it needs to make sure that it's viable for the food supply, food security system in Brazil, both domestically and for its very large export production. So they're not easy choices. They're complex. Climate change is making it much harder to negotiate these transitions.
Thank you for that great answer, John. So I'm going to pose that to Michael too. So the question I posed to him was, if the public understood how much our power depends on water and how much our water depends on power, how might that affect us, how our decisions are made, and what policies might it affect?
That's a great question, and thank you for having me. I just connected. My plane was severely delayed. I'm so sorry about that, but glad to be here, part of this conversation. I think the most people don't understand the connections of energy and water, but in particular, our policymakers and planners don't. And I think if we take the energy supply chain, take just the power sector and how dependent it is on water, if the planners do that, they might think about a more water lean fuel mix for the power sector. And that includes things like wind and solar that don't need water cooling. So we might pick different things because of the water advantages of those options. But we also might just push for more broadly energy efficiency and other things to use less energy to get the same kind of outputs we want or service we want, but with less energy so that we have less water impact. I think those vulnerabilities are a big deal. And if we just understood them better when we're planning, we'd think about that. It's like if we have a power sector that won't work because there's a drought, well, that's not going to be good for any of us. So that's one part of it. The other part is if we understood how energy intensive our water system is, we'd be more mindful about our water use and what kinds of water we use for different things. We use the highest quality water in the world to flush our toilets, and that doesn't always make sense. We don't need the same kind of quality water to irrigate our lawns or crops or the things. We can think about matching the quality water to the purpose and then be more water efficient overall. We use water for a lot of stupid purposes that we wouldn't do if we valued it appropriately, putting it a right price on water, but also recognizing its energy intensity. So great question, and would love for people to understand those connections more deeply.
Cool, thank you. We're seeing a lot more droughts and extreme heat waves right now. And so this is putting strains on our power grid and also on our water systems. So I wonder if you both could go a little bit more deeper into what are the biggest vulnerabilities in our water energy system right now, and are we planning ahead for all these problems that will probably arise in the next decades?
I think we're not planning. I think the challenge is, let's take the United States or Texas, where I am right now, is we built a lot of the energy system, for example, in the 1970s and 80s when population was significantly smaller, but also the weather was different. And so we built our energy world for a different kind of weather than the weather we have now, or the weather we're going to have in the coming decades, since that's a real problem. And it shows itself most obviously with drought. If we have more frequent, more intensive droughts, we won't have the water for water cooling. We won't have the water to spin the turbines at hydroelectric dams. We won't have the water for irrigation of different crops. That'll be a real problem. But you can also have the problem of having too much water. If you have a flood that damages power plants, or in this situation in Texas in 2017 with Hurricane Harvey, where we had so much water, it created a water quality problem because it flooded the refineries, and we had oil and gas and chemical slicks and spills and things like that. So it can get you from being too scarce or too abundant or too hot. You can't safely cool your nuclear power plants, for example. Or if it's too cold, it's frozen, then the system breaks, like what we had in Texas in Winter Storm Uri in February 2021. So I think that's my long way of saying, yeah, we're not planning for the weather of the future. We built our system for the weather of the past.
That's a great point that Michael's just made. There's a term of art that I think is really useful to describe this situation. It's especially true for water resources. It's called deep uncertainty. It was an idea that was first published around 2012 in a World Bank report by a team of economists and engineers. And the idea with deep uncertainty is that there's some parts of the climate that are so difficult to be able to predict into the future that we don't know if things are going to get wetter or drier, if we're going to have more rain in the spring and less in the summer. It's a really deep issue actually in the way that we run our civilization, the way that we have really for centuries. As we look at the past. Sometimes it's 30 years, sometimes it's 50 years, sometimes it's 100 or 200 years, and say, this is what we think the future is going to look like. And if we can't do that anymore, then it becomes much more difficult to plan and prepare. And this has been a crisis in the engineering community in particular. There was an important paper that was published around 2008, 2009. It's called Stationarity is Dead. It was in the journal Science. And it really focused on this problem that the basic decisions that we've used to manage water, to think about what it's going to look like in the future, no longer work. The good news is that we have developed a lot of really good approaches about how to manage water resources despite deep uncertainty. The U.S. is a little bit slow in that process. There are other countries, and they're often surprising countries: Bangladesh, Zambia, the Netherlands, Mexico, that are much better about dealing with deep uncertainty in a more systematic way than the U.S. But to give you an idea, like a really tangible example of what Michael's talking about, I'll name two dams. The first one is the Hoover Dam on the Colorado River. It was built in the 1930s. It was at the time it was the world's largest dam. It's still one of the world's largest dams. That's how big it is. Its capacity has remained constant, but the amount of water that's in the reservoir behind that dam has been falling quite steadily over the past 25, 30 years. And there's a very good chance, especially given the snowpack in the west this year, that it will no longer be able to generate hydropower at all. And that it's really going to become a giant dead pool of water by sometime in July or August. That's something that you all can check on, and that has important implications for the energy of places like Los Angeles, Sacramento, all of Arizona, much of Colorado. It's a massive area that is supplied by the energy systems there. But it's even unfortunately, like places like the US, up until fairly recently, we transmitted our systems for building water infrastructure to other countries. Really poor countries like Zimbabwe and Zambia. There's on the Zambezi River between them, there's another really huge dam, the Kariba Dam. It's worth Googling. The images are really stark about how low the water is there, and it's actually straining not just the energy systems, but really the whole model of trying to have economic development to reduce the level of poverty over something like 5 countries in East Africa. It's really disturbing. So we need to not just think about how we take our energy systems, our water systems, and get them ready, not just for the next 5 years or 10 years, really the next 2 or 3 centuries. And we also need to be able to retrofit our existing systems and be able to adapt them to be able to get ready for not just current conditions, but where we seem to be headed.
Thank you. The next question we're going to talk about is AI. So AI is about to exponentially, explode even more, and it's not necessarily. Not everyone in the public is aware that AI actually consumes a lot of water. So there's a heavy footprint in terms of cooling the water, and also in terms of electricity required to power these AI systems. And so in the US, for instance, we're building AI, data centers in Arizona where it's already water scarce, and in different countries in Asia, the government's having to decide between giving the water to AI or to farmers. In South America, there's people needing water for drinking, but the government has to decide between AI and where the water goes. So would you like to share a little bit about how might we plan for AI and water in the future, and what decisions do we need to make around this?
John, you want to go first, and then I'll comment after you?
Sure, that sounds good. Michael's actually set this up really well already. These data centers, it's hard to describe, like if you haven't been tracking the issue, how many of them are being built right now, and the scale of the construction and the concentration where they tend to occur. To give you some idea, something like 80% of the world's internet traffic actually goes through a single county, a little bit west of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. If you were to drive through this one county, you would just see windowless box after windowless box. It's a huge concentration of buildings, and you'd see steam coming out of them in many cases. So they're processing your cat videos. They're processing your ChatGPT queries. And the chips that do this, they consume a lot of energy, and they have to, because they run so hot, they actually have to be cooled. The Washington Post a few months ago had a really good story on the direct water consumption for cooling purposes in AI centers in particular. And my passion is fueled by Coke Zero mostly, but roughly a simple query, say you're revising your resume on ChatGPT, uses something like 10 ounces of water. Producing a video produces several times that amount of water for the cooling. There are other major hotspots. The second biggest hotspot in the US is in Phoenix. I heard New York Climate Week last fall, the mayor of Phoenix talk with both fear and passion about how terrified she is about these facilities. She has no control over where they appear inside the city limits of Phoenix. They're often in residential neighborhoods. They don't pay very much for the water utilities. They don't build new infrastructure to support their energy or water consumption. And they actually are, because of the legislature, they don't even pay property tax. So they consume a massive amount of water in often even in water abundant places, they actually make them water scarce. But the secondary impact, and this is really important too, this is what's going to become a legislative issue in the next 1 or 2 years, is that they are straining our electrical grid. And because of the way the US has set up most of our electrical grid, it's very water intensive, as Michael suggested. And so they often consume 4 to 5 times as much water through their energy consumption as they do through their direct water cooling. So they have a massive multiplier effect, often in the areas where we least need that competition.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's very timely. I'm actually working on a documentary episode on AI, energy, and water. So we've got this Thirst for Power documentary, and also thirstforpower.com has a bunch of educational materials. And we have a variety of partners we work with, including Itron, which is like a smart meter manufacturer, smart technology manufacturer for water, electric, and gas utilities, and the State Energy Conservation Office that pay for the development of educational materials, like you saw a little bit there, and other things are making. And we're using that to develop some more educational materials around AI, energy, water, because it's water intensive, as John just said, and energy intensive. Just to put some numbers on it, if we take the house I'm sitting in right now in Austin, typical peak demand in the summer is like 5 kilowatts. If I plug in my electric car and the house, maybe it's 10 kilowatts. A typical computer rack at a data center, if we go back a year ago, was like 15 kilowatts. So maybe a several homes worth or a couple homes worth of power. In Texas, where you have a lot of air conditioning, in a more mild climate, that's equivalent to like 5 houses. It's like 5 houses of power in one computer rack, which is about my height and size. This year, there'll be about 150 to 250 kilowatts. They've gone up by a factor of 10. Next year, there'll be about 400 to 600 kilowatts. And then within 2 years, there'll be about a megawatt. 1 megawatt of power consumption per computer rack. 1 megawatt is the same power consumption of a Walmart superstore. So you have a Walmart superstore power consumption in one computer rack, which is my height and size, and have hundreds of those computer racks inside a data center that's designed for training these large language models for AI. And because there's so much power density in one spot, the chip, you can't cool it effectively with air. You're going to have to use a liquid, usually water. There are certain dielectric fluids you could use as well, but water is the desired coolant that people want for these data centers. And these data centers typically get built in places that don't have a lot of water. Now, Virginia is this exception, but Virginia is tapped out where there's not much more room for data centers. So they can build them in Nevada or Texas or places that don't have a lot of water. And that means the data centers will look for a lot of water, and they're competing with municipalities and agriculture, you name it. This is going to be a huge, huge problem. It's a solvable problem, I would say, as an engineer, but it's a huge problem because right now it's just a strain on the system, all the water that they need for the data centers. What we can hope for optimistically someday is that artificial intelligence will accelerate the discovery of some of the solutions we need. Better membranes for desalination, better treatment techniques, better water harvesting techniques, ways to do irrigation efficiency so that we need less water on the farm, get more crop per drop. There are a lot of things that AI can do to help us solve our water problems, but that's going to take a few years. And in the meantime, we're going to feel AI in the data centers and the water cooling they need as a strain on the water resources. And this is going to be a real problem. And we already have municipalities stopping data centers, mostly over the water issue. There's also electricity affordability issue, but really they're concerned about the water. So big problem. And as these chips become more powerful, as the racks become more power intensive, water cooling will only grow. The capital spending, it's hard to put numbers on it that make sense. Hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars. You pick your astronomical number. It's probably even bigger than that. It rivals every infrastructure build out we've had in modern America. It rivals the interstate highways, rural broadband, that kind of thing. You have to go back to like the railroads in the 1880s to find an equivalent scale of capital investment. And water is going to be a big part of that. I'm hopeful, because I'm always hopeful. I'm hopeful that it means there's an infusion of money into the water system that will pay for the irrigation efficiency that we need, that will pay for the better water management systems in the pipes and the city infrastructure, that we can use the money of AI for water to help get better efficiency and conservation. That's not happening yet, but that doesn't mean it can't happen.
I'd also like to point out that it's worth Googling maps of where you see these data centers, and they're often sold. The category of companies that that build these, that specialize in building and operating them. They're called hyperscalers, and this is many of the companies that you already know: Meta, Google, Apple. These are companies that are investing on a massive scale, so much so that there are a lot of economists that actually think the U.S. economy would have been in recession for the last 9 months or so, except for the amount of the physical construction processes of data centers around the country. And where are they happening? They tend to, Phoenix is a little bit of an exception to have it happen in an urban center. I think that's mostly because of the legislature interfering in the process there, giving lots of tax breaks to the hyperscalers. But if you look in general, they are going into the less developed states, and I would say the less developed countries worldwide. They have a lower regulatory oversight. They're often being sold as a rural economic development a plan. You're going often from physical farms where you grow plants or cattle to data farms and AI farms that uh, provide services like you're receiving over your phone or your tablet or your computer right now. And they often have a very mixed benefit in terms of rural development. So for Atlanta in the US, for instance, most of the data that's really consumed in there is actually in South Carolina or it's in Alabama. And and they have lighter regulatory frameworks, and those legislatures have often tried to kind of bring in that type of investment. So, since this is focused on climate action, I think this actually is something that, as individuals, you should really care about, and it matters on the carbon side. We want to make sure that we're this important part of our economy that we're considering the carbon implications of it. But we also need to think about close to my heart the kind of long-term ability for us to adapt and build resilience in our economies, in our ecosystems, in our communities. And most of that's about water. Most of that is about how we make our long-term water choices. And data and AI centers are a new seat at the table. They didn't really exist 10 years ago. Certainly not in the same order of magnitude as they are now, or the order of magnitude that they'll be in just a couple of years. So this is something that is going to affect us for a long time, and it should be something that we are taking action on with our legislators, thinking about putting them in places that maybe make more sense, making more mindful decisions about how we want to make sure that these centers play a larger role in our water economy, not just in our data and information economy.
Mm.
And I just want to cut in really quickly to celebrate that we reached our goal. So great work, everybody. We reached that 300 action goal that we set at the beginning. So we're just going to leave it there for these last 15 minutes, but I encourage you to keep taking action, getting that number as high as you can before the end of the hour. So yeah, thanks so much. Sorry to interrupt.
Cool. Congratulations.
That's a great news interruption. That's great.
Cool. Let's turn a little bit to the different types of ways we produce energy. So we have, the fossil fuel based, and we also have renewables. Could you explain a little bit how each of these different forms of energy relate to the water issue?
So yes, that's great. And all of them use water in one way or another, but some are more water intensive than others. The most water intensive typically are bioenergy or the forms of energy that require water directly for irrigation. And I'm thinking especially like corn-based ethanol for transportation, which is not a super efficient way to do transportation anyway, but that's very water intensive if it's irrigated. If it's rain-fed, maybe you worry about a little less, but those bioenergy forms are very water intensive. Hydroelectric with the large reservoirs of water certainly uses a lot of water. Whether it consumes a lot of water will depend on what climate you're in. If you're in the desert Southwest, you have a lot of evaporative loss. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, maybe you don't have as much loss. So how much water you're evaporating or consuming for hydroelectric will depend a lot on region. Then you have the thermal power plants, the ones that use heat to make steam, to spin a turbine to make electricity. That's like coal and nuclear, natural gas, oil in some cases, biomass in some cases. They tend to use a lot of water for cooling, so they're very water intensive. And then if you have geothermal, where you're using the heat from the earth, this is renewable, it's sustainable, it's carbon free, but can be water intensive if you're injecting water down hole to help make the steam or the heat that you use to spin turbines. There are some geothermal plays where the water is naturally occurring, so you don't have to add additional water. You might not consider that as water intensive. And then you get to the other forms of renewables like wind and solar, really not water intensive at all. You might use some water to clean the solar panels. You might use some water at the factories to make the materials, to make the blades, or maybe the resins and the wind turbine blades. You might have water at the mines for the original materials, but it's pretty minor. So there's some water embedded in the manufacturing, a little bit of water in the maintenance, but then really water related. That's one of the main advantages in a place like Texas, where I am with wind and solars. You don't need water cooling, and so that's really great. So the great variability, I guess, on them in terms of what their water needs are. Also, different kinds of vulnerabilities. So if you are a power plant like nuclear, gas, or coal that needs a lot of water for water cooling, then you have the problems we talked about earlier. If you have a drought, then you don't have the water you need for cooling, or if the water's too hot from a heat wave, you don't get effective cooling. But wind turbines and solar also have a water vulnerability if it's a wet winter weather event. So if you have a really wet winter storm, you can get ice coating that forms on the blades of the wind turbines, and so that shuts down your ability to operate the turbine safely. Or you might have snow covering the panels, which reduces the output, although it can melt quickly. So you have different kind of vulnerabilities. Coal piles can freeze in the winter, they can't use them, or the cooling ponds can freeze if it's too cold. So you have different vulnerabilities and different water needs. But generally speaking, the more popular forms of energy these days, which is really like wind, solar, and natural gas, uses a lot less water than coal-fired power plants in the power sector. If you look at the fossil fuels we use for transportation, like gasoline from oil, oil also uses water. We use water for hydraulic fracturing. The hydraulic means water for fracturing the shale. You also use water to make steam at the refineries and to cool different systems. So every form of energy, you name it, has some water touch somewhere in supply chain, and therefore a risk of environmental impact, but also a vulnerability. But the good news is we're moving towards water leaner options as time goes on. If we build a lot of really big nuclear power plants of traditional style, they'll be very water intensive, but some of the newer small modular reactors are air cooled quite often. And so those might be better. We'll see how it goes.
Cool.
Yeah, and these are not theoretical issues, right? These are issues that we see very present on the ground. For instance, there's a good question about sodium-cooled nuclear power plants in the in the chat. I don't, I haven't been tracking those very deeply, but they seem to have a relatively small water footprint with them. But one of the issues is also we have so much that's already installed, right? Like new systems are often going to be really important for emerging economies that are going through kind of rapid development phases. But let's say a really mature economy like France, 80% of its power comes from nuclear. And Japan is about the same. Something like 95, 98% of Norway's energy comes from hydropower. It's similar for Peru, actually. We see these deep connections between water and climate in a lot of places. Twice in the past 20 years, France has come within days or a week of having to shut down its nuclear power plants because they were that close to running out of cooling water. Facing really dire choices about the safety of these facilities. Norway, a very wealthy country, arguably much wealthier than the US by some measures, has actually had a significant problem with a decline in its ability to generate enough power because of changes in the snowpack and in the seasonal flows of its rivers for its hydropower generation. Something even more true in in Peru, where the climate is changing much more quickly than it is in Norway. So these are present issues. They are having an impact on real cities, on real communities. And often they're placing the operators of these facilities in terms of making very difficult trade-offs. In France, for instance, the regulatory system that they use for their water, the second most important priority for the water that's in a river or a lake is for the ecosystems, and the first is for the nuclear power plants. So if they're diverting all the water to the plants, that means that the ecosystem is really suffering. And the farmers are way out of that, right? The cities and their urban water supplies are way out of that. So these are quite significant choices. When you think about a country like Bhutan, Nepal, countries that they don't have coal, they don't have natural gas. They can't afford to build a nuclear power plant. Solar is not a great option in that part of the Himalayas. All they have are that one side of the country is lower than the other side of the country, and so they're really good for making a lot of hydropower. And those are also the places that are most sensitive to these kinds of impacts. So it's really I think a challenge that we face to think about what does fair, sustainable development really mean in much of the world right now if our water supplies are less predictable and they're harder to manage and how do we do that in a way that helps protect the communities and ecosystems that we really care about.
Mm. So it takes a lot of energy to move water around. So say in California, 20% of the energy is being used to clean and move water around. Is this true of other places in the world? And how can we lessen the amount of energy we're using to just move water around? Is there nature-based solutions?
John, do you want to go first, and then I'll follow you? Yeah.
Yeah, I call myself a resilience scientist, but my doctoral work is actually in freshwater ecology, ecohydrology, and I often am talking to countries, to engineers, to economists about like a broader array of options that are open to them than maybe ones that they've thought about over recent decades. And like, are there other things we can do than just pouring concrete? And there actually is quite a bit. I would say in a time of rapid climate change, that the most widespread problem that we have as a species is how we store water. And there has actually been a lot of innovation in that space. Not all of it is necessarily relevant to energy, but not directly. I'll come back to that point. But for instance, California, starting about 6 years ago, their Department of Water Resources, a small, clever team of folks in the state government, they said, we are having increasing water scarcity, but we're also having more flood events too. We're having both things happen at the same time. And the reason that they're having water scarcity is that the dry season is getting longer because of climate change. And the reason that they're having more flood events is that when winter precipitation falls in the mountains there, it's not snow anymore, or it doesn't last very long as snow. It goes straight to liquid water. And so it creates these sudden flood events. So you get this kind of dual type of impact. Well, this team, they came up with I think a really elegant, even a beautiful solution. They said, what if we slowed that water down? What if we like the extra water that's coming in the wet season and the dry season and the winter floods, we push it into farmers' fields, into pastures. Into natural areas, and we let it sit there for a while. We let it infiltrate, and they did this as an experiment in a couple of river valleys in Northern California, and it was incredible. They actually were able to create by a very large amount new storage in groundwater in the aquifers in the winter, and it actually was able to create more water that was available for farmers and for communities than they were actually getting from the snowpack during the dry season. The state rolled it out across most of California. Agua, we were a small advisor in the process. We actually connected that work to some groups like the World Bank that do a lot of international development funding. we said like this is a solution that should work in the Andes. This is a solution that should work around the Himalayas as well in India or Pakistan. And so this idea of it's called FloodMar, flooding and managed aquifer recharge is a system that is starting to become pretty widespread. And what it means for energy is it's less pressure on the water that's needed for energy systems, right? The farmers in the cities that do use significant amounts of water as well. They can pull from a different pool than the energy systems are making use of. So it does have a secondary impact on those energy systems. And there are other types of nature-based solutions that are used for storage. For instance, many of our riparian systems are rivers around the world, like the Yangtze or the Mississippi. We've often, if we were to go back 100 years ago, 200 years ago, we would see massive riparian wetlands. On the Yangtze in China, some of these wetlands were so large that 200 or 300 years ago, they would have naval battles inside of these wetlands with competing armies. But during the early communist period, they were worried about flood damage, and they blocked them off. They channelized this massive river and to make it flow straight, and they cut off those wetlands. China has been opening those wetlands up again in the middle and lower Yangtze, and the impact of that is that those wetlands actually serve as a dry season storage system. So it actually helps places like Shanghai, Chongqingdao, some of the downstream massive cities. Shanghai alone is 25, 30 million people, right? It's a very thirsty city, and they need a lot of water. So that ecological component is actually really important to the future of how China continues to develop. And the Army Corps in the U.S. has done similar things along the Mississippi and other rivers in the U.S.
Cool. Thank you. Well, that's a very fascinating coverage of that whole area of the nature-based solutions. Well, thank you very much to both Michael and John for coming on today to this panel discussion. So I'm going to hand it over now back to Amber and Kaylee.
Perfect. Thank you all so much, Alpha, John, and Michael. It was a really fascinating and engaging conversation. And thank you to everyone who joined us to learn as well as to take action. Before we wrap up, Brett Walter, the founder and CEO of Climate Action Now, is going to share a few quick updates with everyone here.
Hi, everybody. And boy, I just want to acknowledge, I want to acknowledge all of you for showing up for what might have seemed like a very esoteric subject. And I don't think, when climate people are having conversations, water is not like, I don't think it gets the weight that it deserves. I don't think people understand, how threatened our water supplies are and how significant it is. So having said that, thanks to all of you for coming to learn about this incredible subject. But also, I really want to do a shout out to our panel and Michael and John and Alpha. These are people who are dedicating their lives to helping people understand the significance of this issue and find solutions. And they clearly are very solution-oriented people. And so I just want to thank you guys. I think it's just so great, what you're doing and the work you're doing. And it's totally underappreciated, but not by this group here. I think most of us here, I probably know 1,000 times more than we did before this hour started. I just wanted to make our group here aware of a couple things that Climate Action is doing. One thing I don't know how many people know about our Substack, newsletter, the Dose of Hope, your dose of climate hope. This is really an amazing resource. We have a very talented young man who he's really a prodigy. He consumes information about good things happening around the world in climate. He distills it, and then he writes posts like, for example, this one that starts with an action, and then there's reasons for hope. So these are, I know a lot of us are very stressed these days by what's happening, in the country. And of course, climate is not the most cheerful topic that we deal with. So I just want to encourage all of us to kind of look for hopeful developments as well, because it's not, things aren't so great in this country, but lots of really great things are happening around the world. And this newsletter, Your Dose of Climate Hope, can help you stay abreast of what's happening and give you a boost in the when you get it into your inbox every day. I also wanted to make you aware of something I'm very proud of. This is something we did at Climate Action Now early on. In addition to giving folks the ability to take action really quickly and easily with first with the app and now with the action carousel, which some of you are using during the action party, one of the very first things we did was we created a service which we call Save the Planet. And we just completed an upgrade to this. And I just wanted to point out something. This is really quite extraordinary. For a certain amount of money each month, we will plant, we, through our nonprofit partners, will plant a certain number of trees, we'll avoid a certain amount of carbon pollution, and we'll protect, and this is the big news here, even at $9.95 a month with the lowest level subscription citizen, we can permanently protect an acre of Amazon rainforest. And you heard, I think it was John was saying earlier about how threatened the Amazon is. This is a vital ecosystem. And that is really incredible that with such a small amount of money, you can help permanently preserve Amazon. And I just want to say, if you're wondering how is that possible, well, it's possible because the Brazilian government has donated the land, but the deal was that nonprofits and indigenous people had to pay for the legal fees and all kinds of kind of administrative work needed to protect the land. And that's what your dollars do. They're helping to pay the legal fees and the administrative costs of preserving this land. And so, and then the other change we made to this is a portion of the dollar goes to avoiding carbon. And what's really cool about how we do that is we are working with a nonprofit called renewables.org. This is a really interesting nonprofit. And what they do is your dollars will help finance solar development in the global south, where those dollars have 5 times the benefits of solar development in the global north. And that's because in the global south, you have lower costs, you have more sun, and you're displacing dirtier energy. So this Save the Planet subscription is really, can we get a link to that, Kaylee, in the chat for folks? Is an amazing way for a very relatively small amount of money. You could just be doing something every month that is making a very positive impact. But don't stop sending your messages to your legislators. That's super important too. And can we also put the link in there, Amber, to the daily dose for folks? I know we need encouragement. We need hope. Hope is the antidote. And so it's what we all need. So that's enough for me. We're 3 minutes past the hour. You guys have been an incredible panel, incredible group of people. Thank you for coming. And then did we put in the chat, Amber, notice of our next monthly dose of Climate Hope event? Oh, this is so cool.
Yes,
We're going to be interviewing Kevin Chow, who is the co-founder of Bright Solar. And this is the nonprofit that has come out of nowhere, and they've taken on the job of bringing balcony solar to the United States. And some of you know balcony solar has been a huge success in Germany, but there's all kinds of regulatory barriers here in the United States. And this group, Kevin Chow and his team, are knocking down those barriers at a phenomenal rate. We've got like 27 states now that have legislation pending to facilitate balcony solar. Right, so these people have an apartment, right? You buy a panel, you stick it on your balcony, you plug it in, and you're getting free power. So this is going to be a very exciting event, just in another few weeks. And so again, thank you everybody. Thanks for coming. And to our panel, I hope you guys can hang around with my team for a few minutes afterwards for an after debrief. That's just for the panel, please, in the panel breakout room. So bye bye, everybody. Thank you so much. See you next time.